every moment of our lives these days is accounted for. We go to office, we go to work, we rush to the airport to go to an event in another city. And in the middle of all this frenetic activity, we never have time to stop and think why we're here. What does the future hold for us? What lies ahead for us and for the human race? Well, the next 45 minutes are going to change that. Because we have someone really special here for you this afternoon, who's going to show us a little something that is going to both fascinate you and challenge you at the same time. Please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Henrik Scharfe from the University of Aalborg in Denmark.
Thank you, Kunal. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here at the India Today Conclave.
Dr. Scharfe, I know you've already been here since yesterday. What are your first impressions of India?
You know, it's my first time in India, so I'm still a little overwhelmed. Most people seem very nice. The traffic, though, the traffic seems a little bit complicated.
It is. But since you're from Denmark, is it a very hot March for you?
Yes, the spring here in Delhi is almost like the Danish summer, so we are perfectly at home.
Well, stick around. It's going to get a lot warmer in a couple of months. So you should come back again and then see what our summer is really like. Well, Doctor, I'm going to leave the floor to you. Please take it away and show us what you're here to show us. Please.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Android Society, a society where humans and robots live together, work together, and play together.
I think we're still queuing the AV session, please. Can we cue the audio?
Over the last decade, we have seen a tremendous amount of progress in the world of robotics. And I mean every single aspect of robotics that you can think of. We are seeing new sensors, we are seeing new actuators, we are seeing fabulous new materials you can touch and they remember. We see progress in the arts of making control systems, and all of these fabulous things are now forming together. And the thing is that so many of these technologies are by now mature enough to combine into products that will affect the lives of most people on the planet. In fact, projections are that the market for domestic robots will be as big, perhaps, in just a foreseeable range of years as the industry of the automobile today. Yeah. And if you combine that with the growing middle classes of Asia and some of the stuff that's happening elsewhere in the world, chances are that the robotic technologies are going to be one of the defining technologies of the century. In this talk, I'm going to focus especially on a small subset of all of that, namely the robots that look like humans, because this is what I do. So there is a special reason for this. But what we do is that we can move from something like this. Most people find this slightly disturbing, to something like this. I don't know if it's any better. But we can actually end up with something like this, which most people find at least somewhat agreeable. Now, why is it important to work with humanoid robots specifically? There is something about this man-machine that is so compelling that it drives an enormous narrative in our society. And that narrative, the story of the man-machine combined into one thing, is really something. If you take a look at what's going on in the world today, we typically do this by Googling stuff. If you Google the term robot and look under the images, this is what you'll see. Now, there's a lot of pictures here. Most of these pictures are actually not robots. They are pictures from science fiction, from concept drawings of artists and so on. So if you take that away, we are left with this. Now, these are actual robots in the sense that you can go somewhere and you can touch them or you can buy them. A couple of these are simply toys. Let's take them away. So this is what we are left with. Now, the reason I want to show you this is that when we look at all these pictures that I just showed you, all of this stuff is forming our perception of what an android is or what a robot is. And because of that, I think it's really important to work with the humanoid androids. The science fiction world has been exploring these things for many years. And it's fascinating to see how artists in the movie industries are working to portray this mixture of man and technology, of biology and technology coming together. A colleague of mine said some years ago that artificial intelligence as a research discipline is the art of making computers do what they do on the movie. And I guess you can say something similar about robotics. So we are, in a sense, trying to accommodate what you will see on the big silver screens. And these images, yeah, this one should probably seem familiar. These images are forming our perception of what an android is. Because most of us actually do not have first-hand experience with an android. But we're going to remedy that today because the DK is here and you can meet him. Yeah. So let's take a look at what's going on in the research world. So here you see an infant robot. This is actually a robot that's designed to help people understand what's going on when you're dealing with early-born children. This one, in my opinion, is the scariest, the most spooky robot in the world, CB square. It's the size of me, but it acts like a baby. It's gray, and it's a nasty robot. This is the distant cousin, and I think this one is actually produced somewhere in India, but I'm not exactly sure. We do see these projects around the world with all kinds of ethnicity and all age groups. And I think this is quite telling. It's really important to understand that this is not just one single project with one single robot. But what is happening across the world is a massive interest in these kinds of technologies and the exploration of what these things can mean to us and how they will affect our lives. So in this new situation that the robot is going to place us in, what will be the winning strategy? Here is my take on that. In order to be successful in this kind of society, in this kind of economy, we need to do three things. First, we need to educate. And the reason we need to educate is that the technological surroundings that we find ourselves in are becoming more and more complex. And we need the generations ahead of us to be well-trained to deal with that. Not just in the technological sense, but in the human sense. They need to understand and to be able to explore what it means to be a human being in this kind of condition. That's number one, educate. The second, we need to investigate. And when I say investigate, I mean in the full range of that word. We need to investigate using microscopes, looking far into the minute details of the structure of the world, and zoom in as much as we possibly can. We also need to explore and investigate the world using telescopes, looking as far and as deep as we possibly can. And lastly, we do need to examine the world at great intensity using a stethoscope, listening to the heartbeat of the human, because that is the most precious sound in the world. And without that, the rest of this does not make any sense. We need to educate, we need to investigate, and thirdly, we need to combinate. The status of the world is that there's so much technology that is ready to be combined into new kinds of adventures for everybody. And chances are, again, that the true innovative class of tomorrow and of the years to come is not going to be brand new things that we have never seen before, but it will be combinations, novel combinations of things and principles and stuff that is already known across the world. So when I try to look at the horizon and see what is going to meet us, where are we headed with all this robotic stuff, I take note of, again, 3 principles. And the first principle is this. Today, most robots will have a very limited range of action. They're not able to move very far. But this is going to change. And they are going to become extremely mobile. And that means that they will be able, in different aspects, to occupy human inhabited spaces. Now, this calls for a couple of remarks. Obviously, if you are to navigate through a space like this, or through the bazaars of New Delhi, that is a challenge. I'll grant you that. There was, of course, a technical challenge. How do I avoid bumping into people? But there is a challenge that's even bigger in my book, and that is you need to figure out where to go. Because humans are always driven by something. We move because we are motivated to do this or to do that or to do that. And this kind of intentionality will need to be incorporated into the machines as well. Here is the second principle. And it revolves around networks. Most robots today are controlled one computer to one robot, and that's it. This is going to change in a very big way. And the robot of the future is going to be a networked robot. The implications are actually quite staggering. Imagine you have something like my flexible friend here sitting in an office, and you ask him, where is Henrik, let's say? And of course, if it's not me asking, he will look around and scan his immediate environment, but also he's going to connect with all his cousins around the building or around the city and gather information from them and come up with an appropriate answer. Well, Henrik's at the coffee shop down at the corner. He'll be back in about 10 minutes. 15. Yeah. So the difference between a robot that is not networked and a class of robots that are networked is similar to that of a landline telephone and a mobile smartphone. So we're looking at a really, really decisive change. The third principle is this. Because most robots today are just hacked into one computer, and that's what's defining their actions, they are, in a sense, quite limited in terms of intelligence. But because these new robots are going to be networked and mobile, being around, moving around, they will also be able to draw on multiple sources of intelligence, the entire power of the internet into these machines. But more than that, they're also going to be, as I just mentioned, connected to dozens or hundreds or thousands of other robots, sharing information and sharing solutions. So a robot that's cleaning a pool might encounter a problem. What will it do? It will call up the company on its own and look for solutions to this problem from all the other robots that are cleaning pools around the world. I think that the countries, the organizations, the companies that are to succeed in the robot reality that we are about to face are those who understand these 3 principles and how they can best be combined. So I think there is a very dramatic lesson here to be learned. In the meanwhile, of course, we struggle with this weird kind of perception. And most people that meet my Android will have this experience that, on one hand, well, there is this human form that commands respect and a certain kind of interaction. But on the other hand, we also know that this is, in fact, a machine. And both of these images are colliding inside our minds as we try to make sense of what's happening in front of us, the mechanical and the organic. But it's actually moving way beyond this. What we are looking at now, already on the drawing desks of many scientists, including myself, are robots that are in part controlled by living tissue making decisions. So I drew up a concept drawing here with a robot with a brain inside. It's not to be taken very literally, because the brain is not going to be inside the robot. It's going to be somewhere else, and the robot will connect to this over the internet. But we are actually, in many different areas of the world, right now planning to build machines that use living brain tissue to make decisions. And that will feed into these robotic systems as well. And obviously, that calls for a number of considerations in terms of ethics, in terms of privacy, in terms of who are we and what are we supposed to be doing in this world. So maybe I'm shocking you a little bit with this. That's completely unintentional, of course. I wouldn't dream of such a thing. But I have a background in artificial intelligence. So I've been working in artificial intelligence for a number of years. And let me tell you about that. Almost everything that's done in artificial intelligence up until now is completely removed from any bodily experience. So we process symbols, we have software that do fabulous things, and we're getting better and better at that. But that kind of intelligence is completely different from ours, because our intelligence is always embodied. We meet the world through our bodies. And even high-level cognitive functions like language or mathematics or some of the other beauties of the world, all of that stuff is actually grounded in our physical perception of the world, the fact that we are here and we meet each other. And this kind of embodied artificial intelligence is not going to be brought about simply by computer programmers. It's going to be brought about by robots that venture out into the world and interact with it and learn from these kinds of experiences. And this is, by all accounts, going to be the next really, really big breakthrough in the science of artificial intelligence. It's going to come from this. Let me tell you a little bit about what we do back home in Aalborg. This is a picture of the robot's office. He has his own office. It's bigger than mine. And it's a very standard, typical office, of course, except the fact that there's a robot sitting behind the desk and there are cameras everywhere and microphones hidden on the table. Because this is an observation lab. So we study the reaction of people when they meet the robot for different kinds of exercises. And behind the screen, in another room, we have the control station. We can control the robot across the internet. I'll get back to that. But we can also, from this room, monitor everything that goes on inside the robot lab and record in great detail what's going on there. We try to... What? Is that an Android selfie?
Oops, I couldn't resist, and you were so busy.
Silly androids. Well, we try not to be too serious all the time, but of course we have to also be a little bit serious every now and then. This is a picture from one of our experiments when we had the robot teach a class of freshman students, so first-year students. Early one morning, they would come to class, about 200 students there, and it was a regular lecture like any other, except that it was a robot sitting in front of them. So I was sitting in the other side of the building, in my office, with my computers. My slides were on the wall, my voice on the PA system like now, but my only bodily presence in the room was the robot. And surprisingly, several of the students did not realize this until the break. Now, obviously, this has caused a lot of jokes about students in Aalborg. And it has also caused a lot of jokes about teachers at Aalborg University. I don't think that our students are any more stupid than the average of the student body of the world, or that our teachers are worse off than what you'll find in any other university. I think something else happened, and that is that we made the situation work. And once you have a situation that's not just displaying a machine like we're doing today, but it's actually taking part in what's going on, and that is meaningful, then the situation takes on kind of a priority of its own, and people are very interested in following what's happening. And so because of that, we made the communication actually sustainable for more than 45 minutes. without being questioned too much. And I think that's a quite nice result. Here's some other stuff that we do. We are very much interested in emotions. How do we communicate emotions? So we have placed me in a number of compromising situations, videotaping my face, and then copying those responses onto the robot, taking pictures of the robot, and have people assess. What do you see in this face? Is it anger? Is it happiness? Is it disgust? What's going on? And so here we have a computer program analyzing the facial expression of the robot. So it doesn't get any more self-referenced than that. We also do a lot of demonstrations. This is one of my favorite pictures. Take a look at the little guy over there on the side. He's a future roboticist for sure. Now what you can see in this picture is that a couple of minutes before this was taken, he was all like this. What happened in the meantime is that we switched some of the programs on the robot. So in fact, right here, we shut down all the automated functions, and then he just becomes like, well, an action man. And the little guy says, I get it. Okay, this action man is a little old, it's a little big, it's a little dense around the waist, but I get it, it's an action man. It's an action figure. But what then happens at the exact same time, take a look at the teenagers in the back row. They go all, this is too much. And again, what you can see in this picture is that a couple of minutes before this, they were all very happy. And what we learn from these kinds of expositions is that it's actually very difficult to make everybody happy at the same time. And that's something we need to take into account when we're designing the future robots. Of course, we do also encounter some problems every now and then. This is how we sometimes travel. And it's not a very dignified way of traveling, because you have to do this. Perhaps in this day and age, we shouldn't be talking about dignified travel, but still, I mean, this is ridiculous. You have to go into the odd-size scanner with the golf clubs, with the baby strollers, with the hunting rifles, with the pianos, and whatever people are dragging around the world, and do this. It is not dignified.
Things would be so much easier if I could just get a regular ticket.
But you cannot get a regular ticket, and you know why? Because you do not have a passport. There you go. And you cannot get a passport, you know why? Because you don't have a social security number. There you go. Should robots in the future have a social security number? Should they be able to have passports? Should they be able to travel, perhaps on their own? I'd like to see that happening, and to avoid this kind of stuff. There is another problem as well, and that's this. So when we do this, the entire flight crew will be standing around with their iPhones doing this. You know what that means. And I'm sitting there in the back wondering, who's flying this plane? Really? Who is flying this plane? It's a good thing then, probably, that robots are also taking over in this part of the world. And actually in Europe, we are less than 1 year away from being, at least technically, able to have unmanned passenger flights. That means that effectively you will be walking into an aircraft, it'll take you somewhere, and all of that without a pilot on board. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's like that. Right. Another thing that I enjoy very much is to think about what kind of scenarios would it be reasonable to see in everyday life with these kinds of machines around. Could it be, for instance, that some years ahead of today, when you apply for a new job and you go to a job interview, the guy on the other side of the desk is actually a robot? Yeah, could be. Or that perhaps it becomes quite commonplace to have your own robot. So you would see something like this in the cafe. Yeah, why not? Or a situation like this, where the guy standing is late for another meeting, shows, and the guy sitting, the only one looking in the camera, by the way, is waiting for the next bus, because his job is to go to the school and pick up the children of the family and take them home safely through traffic. I think this is an idea I will try out in Denmark before taking it to Delhi. But is it possible? Or what about this? Two guys sitting back home, one is a robot, and they are making plans for the future. Again, they go down to the street, one will go home, and the robot will take the bus to the airport, fly across the world to give a talk somewhere, and to return safely on his own to report about the happenings of the journeys. Now, if I tell you that all of these scenarios can actually happen within a time range of 10 to 12 years, would you believe me? No? I think they can. If we look at all the progress in robotics as it is today and try to extrapolate that at exponential growth for 10 years, these things are actually within reach. This is doable. Are we going to do it? I cannot say for sure. But we are moving in that direction, quite clearly. So, all of these things compel us to reconsider not just what the machines are capable of, but also what we are capable of. And perhaps this is the most important message of the day, from my side anyway, to allow these machines to inspire us to think in creative ways about what our technological future may look like, and take into account here that the most precious resource on the planet is the human life. It is the most precious resource we have. It's second to none. So when we try to contemplate these things, I would like to end off here by returning to this kind of mantra that I have concerning this. We need to do three things. We need to educate. We need to investigate. We need to combinate. And above all, we need to stay human where it really, really matters.
Thank you for your attention. Henrik will take your questions now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scharfe. Gemini DK and Karina Scharfe, Dr. Henrik Scharfe's wife, who obviously has the controls in her hands.
Yes. Whenever there's a robot, there's always a woman behind it, right?
Absolutely. Dr. Scharfe, you get such weird reactions to your robot everywhere you go. And I know that's a very important part of your research, mapping how humans respond. What is the craziest response you've got so far?
Oh, we had a lot of crazy responses. On a number of occasions, we have had demonstrations where we put up the robot, and people will come into the room, they will say hi to me, they say hi to the robot, they leave again, and we can hear them outside in the hallway, "Where's the robot?" And one time when we were returning from Peru, we have to box him up in a big wooden box to ship him long distance. I learned afterwards that the customs inspectors opened the crate, looked down into it, picked up the phone, and asked the sender for a certificate of death.
Dr. Scharfe, do you sometimes feel that you're playing God? Does that thought ever come to you?
No. Do you?
This is not about playing God. We're not building humans. We're building machines.
Yeah, what he said.
No, but is there a good and evil side of robotics? Are there people who believe that, this is a purer form of our world, this is what we should be like? And is there another side that wants robots to understand human beings and one that wants robots to actually take over in your field?
Certainly. So in a sense, robots are taking over our jobs and have done that continuously for centuries. This is what's happening. And in the future, many people will lose their jobs to robots. They will also create new jobs. Basically, I think that technology is, in a sense, neutral. It can be applied for good and it can be applied for evil. My personal agenda is not to replace the human beings. That would be stupid in my book. But we can learn a lot from these things. I have colleagues, of course, who see differently on this matter and who believe that within the foreseeable future we will be able to download our personalities into a new body, and that will then be a robot, and we can then travel from body to body. It's a kind of a, it sounds familiar, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Personally, I'm not looking for a robot nirvana. This is not my agenda.
Does anybody have questions? I'm sure you do. First question from Varun, please. Can somebody get him a mic?
Thank you, Dr. Scharfe. I'm sure you're aware of there are 3 laws of robotics according to Isaac Asimov. I'm not sure how much those factor into your work, and I think those govern the ethical implications of how people work with robotics. Do you have any examples where you couldn't do research because of ethical implications, and that you yourself stopped yourself? And thirdly, if what we're trying to do here is replicate a human experience, if a robot starts behaving like a human, as in adapting and learning, at what point do we then consider it a living being?
Yeah, those are also really complicated areas. Isaac Asimov is my favorite author. I really love his books, and I think he's quite close on the society, the depiction of the society that we're moving towards. Now, the laws of robotics are not actually laws in a typical judicial sense. It's a fictional construct, and in fact, he spends his entire work exploring where these laws of robotics may fail. Things like a robot may not injure or harm a person. If we look at these scenarios where we have robots in human-populated spaces, it's quite easy to imagine a situation where there would be a conflict of interest. Let's say my robot will pick up my kid from school, and on the way home there is another child who is in danger. What is the robot supposed to do? Now, if it's a very humanoid robot, expectations would be the same as for me, and that is secure child number 1, rescue child number 2, and return to child number 1. But can we reasonably expect that of a robot? That's a little bit more tricky. And what happens if he fails in rescuing child number 2? Will someone then sue him? So there is a lot of different ethical considerations around this. Another issue, of course, is if you have a personal robot, can someone hack it? Yeah? If it has all your personal details, it would be a target. So we need to be worried about different levels of information security as well. And of course, I did not talk today about military robots. That would be the topic of another talk. But there is a whole lot of different or separate concerns in that area. But in terms of development, the distinction between military and civilian really makes no sense. Because what we learn from the history of technology is that ideas follow all kinds of crazy paths. It's very rarely to see that kind of development as a strict line from A to B. In terms of usage, though, this kind of division certainly applies. I mean, the drones can carry bombs, but they can also be used in search and rescue. They can survey vast areas of coastal areas or be useful in many, many different ways.
Doctor, in a more personal sense, can a robot, once you give them artificial intelligence, sort of mess you up emotionally? Do you think it'll make the human race duller? Do you think it'll make the human race less dependent on other people?
Well, that argument has been said about television for decades.
Okay.
And maybe there is some truth in that. Today the argument is mostly about computer games, so we're still waiting to see the long-term effects of that. There is a lot of speculation about that, especially if you're trained or educated into a context where robots are an everyday occurrence in schools, and institutions, at the library, at the police station, wherever you go. Will that mean that, or will it imply that we begin to treat each other in a different way? We really don't know that yet. I hope not. And this is where my mantra of staying human comes into play.
More questions, please? Yeah, it's the gentleman at the back.
I'd like to ask you, do you think that robotics is going to grow into a full-fledged industry in the future, which I'm sure you must be thinking that way? Do you think that it is going to be something that is going to become like a mobile phone that is going to be in every single home? And do you think the cost of production of robots is going to keep coming down in the future? And based on that, I want to ask you, how much would a robot like this cost? Just sort of curiosity.
On the general predictions, I think you're exactly spot on. This is what we're going to see. If we look at the statistics today, we see that the number of industrial robots is rising very slowly, whereas globally, the number of service robots is almost growing exponentially. And by service robots, we mean a host of different kinds of appliances, from vacuum cleaners to lawn mowers to companion robots and to toys and so on. My prediction would be that in the future we will see a vast variety of different kinds of robots, from the very mechanically looking ones all the way up to very human looking robots. If you want something like this that's obviously custom made, it's going to cost you. On the other hand, there are a number of related technologies that are making this much more accessible. So in fact, we do today have the technology to scan your face with a 3D scanner, print a mask like this with a 3D printer, put it on a fairly standard robot, and there you go. So you'd have your own. And that would be at a fairly reasonable cost.
Okay.
Do you want one?
I can take just one more question, last one right here.
So do you find, who currently funds all this research, and do you find that a lack of funds constrains your ability to fast forward this process?
The big issue of today, I think, is, of course, there are some issues regarding research funding here and there. But the wheels are in motion, and they are so much in motion that we, as I said in the beginning of the talk, we have so many technologies that are actually quite mature. The problem today is putting them together. And that calls for some fairly large corporations to go into that, or some fairly large research institutions to do that. I take note of the fact that Google has bought a number of robotics companies over the last half a year, and I'm quite sure there's a reason for that. And we see other major companies like IBM and others also pushing heavily towards robotic research. So this is not going to be exclusively in the hands of universities. We are beyond that. And that's a good thing. The markets are waiting.
Okay, that's all we have time for, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Scharfe, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
In 10 years' time, you're going to send just your Android version to the India Today Conclave to give us a talk on robotics.
I'd love to do that.
Thank you so much. Pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Kunal. Ladies and gentlemen, do put your hands together for this session. And as I call upon Sundar Chainani from Tulsi Nadan Watches India to come up on stage and hand over a small token of our appreciation to Dr. Scharfe. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together for Dr. Scharfe and Geminoid DK.
Thank you for
And for
having
those
me.
of you interested, there's a Google Hangout at 5 p.m. at Jahanhara Hall. And if the doctor is amiable, maybe you can get a picture with the Geminoid DK. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Kunal.